Hi, Sam here. Um, we're on a break from the normal programming for reasons that are a little bit too boring to get into right now. We had a delay with our reading group discussions, so I decided that it was going to be a while till we put out another video, and I wanted to try my hand at some other content for the channel. So I'll be doing a monologue commentary today. If this is altogether way too boring or myopic, you tell me. I'd like some feedback, or yes, if no one watches, that's its own kind of feedback too. Anyway, so um, the question I've got on my mind today is: were people more happy in 1500? Now, you might begin by thinking, well, that's kind of an odd question. I never thought about that. And I guess it's not something that I put a lot of brain space towards in the past either. But the reason it's coming up is because there's been something of a political movement that's based not entirely, but largely out of the Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio. Uh, and I can't say that I'm an expert in it, but it's definitely something that's been around the internet and kind of in the news for really probably the past 2 to 4 years. But more recently, I had watched, based on Mark's recommendation, a video called, of a podcast called Pints with Aquinas, where Andrew Willard Jones, who's a political science professor out of Steubenville, was the guest. So it made me definitely think a lot more about the question. And I guess with that, cards on the table, I guess I'm very much in the William F. Buckley National Review, maybe to throw a Catholic thinker in there, Michael Novak camp, where I think modernity is kind of great and has been kind of a blessing, but that doesn't mean that everything about it is blessed. So, but that said, I mean, if you're looking for critiques of integralism, I probably would suggest looking in other places. I'm not really interested in doing that today. I know, for example, Jonah Goldberg has written extensively about that. If you just do a Google search for Jonah Goldberg integralism, you'd probably get a lot of things. But I guess I'm more interested in, well, why this is coming up and really what's maybe motivating it. So I guess, and I'll frame the discussion today around the question that I had started with. So, were people in 1500 more happy? Well, maybe you could look at that, and to begin with, you could think, that's kind of a dumb question. I mean, to begin with, I mean, sure, there probably were people who are happy and content and like their life in 1500, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out that there's a lot of people who are miserable with their life today. So, I mean, history doesn't necessarily have a set path or telos, if you will, but to to quote Chesterton, and one of the things I had on my note here, the world is what the saints and the prophets saw it was. It's not merely getting better or merely getting worse. There is one thing that the world does: it wobbles. Left to itself, it does not get anywhere. So with that, I mean, you could take that like frame of thinking. You could think, okay, maybe the whole idea of the world getting better or worse, or people as a group getting more happy, less happy, more moral, less moral, maybe it's just kind of a misnomer and sort of a ridiculous idea that I don't know, people who have too much time and who are talking to themselves on YouTube are obsessed with. And to be honest, I probably actually have a decent amount of sympathy with that critique. But I would point out, though, that I do think that while it has a valid point to it, I also think that there is such a thing as collective emotions, or spirits, egregores, if you want to use the Pajoian language. So, like an example that I think of, so I know Paul Vanderklay, he likes to use the example of school spirit. I guess the one I always think of is I think of ghosts, and I don't believe in ghosts. However, there's ghosts in Arlington Cemetery, if you've ever been there. There just are. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean that I saw a white figure that looked like they were from the Civil War. What I mean is that there was a spirit or a feeling that you had that was palpable of mourning and loss when you were there. And I definitely think that people can, as a group, experience things, but also have, I mean, just like you could you could create a group or around a very somber and very serious minded thing like they have in Arlington Cemetery. You could also have a group that maybe, I mean, everyone's been in groups where you could tell, oh, this group is more happy, this group is less happy. So I don't actually think the question itself is necessarily absurd on its face. I do think that humans could move in one direction or the other. Now, I guess the next part is people could think, well, gosh, I would want to live in 1500. That just sounds stupid. I mean, I wouldn't have anywhere near the variety of food that I could eat now. I wouldn't experience the amount of art. I'd have substantially less leisure time, and I'd be much more likely to die of some sort of infectious disease. And I think those are all fair points, but I do think they miss something about happiness, which is that what makes people, or maybe more properly, I should say, I think it misses something about unhappiness. Because what it doesn't get at is this idea that what makes people unhappy isn't necessarily deprivation. I mean, not that anyone chooses to be deprived of something, but what makes people more unhappy, in my experience, is uncertainty. So if you think of it this way, so there's a Donald Miller quote from Blue Like Jazz. It occurs to me it is not so much the aim of the devil to lure me with evil as it is to preoccupy me with the meaningless. So, and then you think of that, you think of it in conversation with the Serenity Prayer, which is probably the most important piece of wisdom literature that was produced in the 20th century. And it begins, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So you could turn the Donald Miller quote on its head, so to speak, and say it's the aim of the devil to preoccupy my mind with things I cannot change. And you think of a lot of what people spend their time with online or when they're not in community with other people, and what they're really paying attention to are things that might actually have a high level of importance, but for which they have a very low level of control. So you think of like we have political elections in the US right now, and I'm sure I'll have lots of conversations with people about them between now and the elections in November. And it's something that I think about where after the 2016 election, it was like, man, I don't know. Some people, I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, oh, people aren't paying enough attention or they're not engaged enough with politics. It's like, I don't know. I go to a bar, like any generic bar that's near me, and I ask people, hey, what do you think of Donald Trump, or what do you think of Joe Biden? And I feel like people would give me fairly informed answers about those things. But if I ask them, how could you be a better spouse, or what could you do to be a better neighbor, or what's a habit you could adopt that would make you more healthy? And I feel like I'd probably get a lot of blank stares because it's not something that preoccupies people. Are so I think in general, mass media and the internet especially has this ability to preoccupy people, things that are high in importance, but that they are low in control. And it's really, I guess, to my way of thinking, a form of emotional manipulation in a sense, or at least it can be. Not that too often, though I think there probably are some political figures who think this way, or, well, I should say political figures or political commentators. I don't think they're necessarily looking to make people anxious or afraid as much as it's sort of a system that traps people with that. So, I mean, I guess to go back to the Willard Jones conversation, which I've got a link to below, I think of that. And so one of the things he talks about is how, and I have maybe some problems with the way he framed it exactly, but I think it makes a real point that if you ask someone, okay, are you on the right or are you on the left politically, then really you're asking them, what is your relationship to the state? So you're taking out what might be some of the most important relationships in their life. So like their relationship to their spouse, their relationship to their children, their relationship to their church or their work, and you're replacing it with the idea of, well, what is your relationship to the state? And I mean, both of them kind of, so if you have on one hand, I guess like maybe Marxism, and you have on the other hand libertarianism, you might think of them as opposites, but really his point was that they're, I guess they're sort of both points around single axis, and the problem is not so much where people are on the axis is what they are positioning the axis around. And to, I guess, go back to the earlier point, it's things that are, and it's probably partially why things like anxiety and depression are so common in modern societies, is that we're formatting ourselves around things that are ideas and situations which are high in importance maybe, but also that they're low in control for us. So I guess to go back to the question though, so were people more happy in 1500? I mean, so maybe the question is a trap. I mean, maybe there's no such thing as a collective happiness, and maybe we're falling into this sort of materialist, determinist kind of vision of history just to even bring it up. So, I mean, that's a real possibility. But I guess if you take that out, I mean, I would say probably not. But I do think that the integralists are getting at a real point, though, which is sort of what you might call, as I heard Louis C.K. refer to it, the laptop loner phenomenon. So if you think about modern society where people are just by themselves and they're not really going out, they're not interacting with friends, let alone a spouse or children, I mean, it is hard to imagine a world where too many people would be completely happy by themselves, which is another point that Willard Jones gets into. I mean, I guess I will say when I heard that, I did think of John Muir, who is something of the patron saint of California. And I kind of thought, well, I think that's example, at least a model of someone who's theoretically happy and who's by themselves. But that's, of course, very different than the laptop loner person. So I guess the short end of it is, I guess I would side with a lot of the common critiques that I've heard of integralism. I do think there is a real point about the way how modern societies do select against satisfaction and try to make people anxious and focus on things that ultimately really aren't that, well, I shouldn't say that aren't that important, but that they ultimately don't have control over. So, and I mean, I do think reconnecting to family and a community, if you are someone who's feeling anxious or afraid or worried, probably is a good step in the right direction. But I also, I don't know, I'm not trading the internet, and I'm not trading any of the other wonderful modern conveniences we have, such as the ability to, I don't know, eat fresh fruit in the middle of winter, or I guess more practically, maybe the modern medicine and everything that entails. And but that said, I think the integralists, I'll give them, I don't know, not definitely not two cheers, maybe a half cheer. Definitely worth checking out. Watch the video that I linked below if this was something that interested you at all. And we'll see you in a couple weeks for our next book discussion about Introduction to Christianity.